All right, welcome back to another episode of the Figuring Out Life podcast. I'm your host, Jack Butler, and today we are going to be talking about uh, Myers Briggs personality test in particular, but really I wanted to touch a quick bit on just the general kind of pseudoscience personality tests, astrology, human design stuff, kind of all of those things. One of my I don't know, big things in life, one of the things that I try to figure out is like, who am I? What do I want out of life, out of the world? How do I see the world? How do I navigate it in a way that feels just true to me? And I find that in conversations that I've had with friends, family, coworkers, etc., everyone's having a similar, asking a similar question or trying to figure that out. When we're born, we're brought up in the world, we learn how to navigate the spaces that we're in, the communities that we're part of, family, society, friends, school, workplace, all of that. We're always constantly figuring out how do we fit in to the broader societal puzzle or familial puzzle, tribal puzzle, etc. And a lot of times through that, I think about being a kid. It's like you pick up on things that your parents say or your parents tell you to do or your friends are doing and not doing, and you learn how to navigate the world in that way, really as a survival mechanism. When we're young, we come into the world literally not knowing what the heck is going on or how to navigate the whole thing, and so we're just taking stuff in and figuring out what do we make of it, what do we do with this, how do we get the people who do take care of us, get their attention so that they can feed us, change us, do whatever so that we can make it to the next day. And that comes with conditioning. And one of the big things over time that I asked myself and that I see out there, just because all these personality tests and human design, astrology, all of that exists, is how do I know what's me versus what's been put inside of me, because of I know that this is how I best navigate my family dynamic, or I know this is how I get my dad not to ask questions that I don't want to have to answer, or I know that this is going to keep my mom happy, and so she's going to make my favorite meal, or allow me to do, hang out with my friends or whatever those things are. But we learn this stuff, and some of it's really us, and it's stuff that we enjoy doing and we want more of, and some of it's more learned behavior, the conditioning behind, oh, okay, I know when I do this, this happens, and this other thing does not happen. And I want the more positive outcome from a relational perspective, so I'm going to do this and instead of that. And just as I get older, as I became my own adult, if you will, really figuring out, okay, what is me versus what's the stuff that I've been conditioned to default to, for example, because it seemed to make my mom happy, or even just didn't make her mad, or stuff like that. It's like I really started to ask those questions as I was no longer under their watchful eye. I think of going to college. And when I went to college, it was like, cool, I am no longer under the watchful eye of my parents. I can now do things that I wouldn't have done, like drink. I can do that and not have to worry about what's my mom going to say or think, because my mom was no longer there. I no longer had to worry about her coming home and catching me drinking or something, as an example. So those questions in general started to come more and more, and it's kind of the first time you're able to, at least from my experience, going to college was really the first time I was really able to say, okay, the same rules that I grew up with don't apply anymore because the environment has quite literally changed. I am now in a college dorm instead of literally in my room back at home with my family. And so, in general, that has led me over time. I'm now 33 years old. So, over time, it's led me down a bunch of different modalities in what you call the pseudoscience space. I honestly think there's a lot of validity behind, human design, astrology, the Myers-Briggs personality test, any other personality tests that are out there, stuff like that. Mostly because what it does is it creates a lens through which you can say, oh, yeah, that is me. That is how I see the world. That is how I do things. And I think it's very powerful because it's a bit of a permission slip of, oh, okay, it's okay for me to be this way naturally. It's okay for me to not be this way that always I acted that way because it made the people around me who I needed for survival happy or not mad or whatever. But I never really enjoyed doing it. I just did it because I felt like I had to get by. And so all of that stuff I think is very valuable for becoming more self-aware and figuring out more what are your true boundaries, what is your true personality versus what are not. And I also think on that note, it's useful to look at these things every once in a while because, as we'll kind of get into a little bit, like they can shift. Those things can change, and you can resonate with parts of it more or less in different seasons of life and all of those things. And I think that's just really it's useful to know because as you grow, as you change, as you experience more, figure out more what your boundaries can be fluid as well. What's this year versus 5 years ago may be very different people, and that's okay. But anyways, I wanted to talk about specifically get into a few of these kind of analyses, if you will, of the different pseudoscience type things that are out there. And I figured I'd start with the Myers-Briggs. I have kind of use Notion, which is a kind of a catch-all organization tool. I think an improved version of like Microsoft Evernote, if you're familiar with that. But I downloaded. I have this thing, this kind of command center around just tracking and figuring out my life. And one of the things that I have in there is my Myers Briggs personality test. And it was interesting looking at it. And I'm going to actually take the time to just go through it and really break down and look at what is it saying, about my personality, what parts of that resonate, what parts don't, and kind of break that down. And really, the point of this exercise is to use it as um, a vehicle, a litmus test of this is how you start to grow more in terms of self-awareness and figuring out your own stuff. And so I'm just doing it through the lens of that I have and putting it out there in the world. So yeah, we're just going to go through it. This is part one. I don't know how deep into it we'll get. It kind of go until I feel like not going anymore. And then we'll call it a day with this particular episode. But yeah, so the first thing that I want to get into with that is my own I guess evolution or shift in terms of the Myers-Briggs personality test in general. So I have no idea how long ago this has been, but as I've gotten older and as I've realized more about myself, I've come to learn and realize that I have grown up in a very performative headspace. And when I say performative, I mean quite literally like entertaining, performing for other people in order to get love, acceptance, etc., etc. And in the Myers-Briggs test, at least when I took it kind of the first time, that came up as the ESFP personality type, which is also nicknamed the entertainer. So if you think of like Marilyn Monroe, because I think that was the example they had at the time, you are extroverted, you're putting yourself out there, you're perceptive of others, but you are quite literally entertaining, right? Meeting with people, connecting with them, but wanting to kind of show them a good time, if you will. And the way that I, years and years ago interpreted that was I was actually masquerading as an entertainer when I had literally one piece of that has shifted over time, which is the E at the beginning, which stands for, extrovert, changed to an I, which is the introvert side of things. So to me, it was fascinating kind of coming back probably a few years ago now, and retaking the personality test and realizing, oh, I'm not as extroverted as I thought I was. My extroversion really came from the fact that because of the spaces that I was in, because of the ways that I just naturally felt I needed to perform for others to like me, that's just where I defaulted, and I was defaulting to extroverted behaviors, but realistically, I really have more introverted tendencies. I enjoy people, enjoy the right people in their company, and I still just need time to just do my own thing and rest and relax and not worry about others to be able to then come back and do more of that. I don't get my energy from interacting with everybody. I may be more of an ambivert. We can get into that later, but the ISFP is known as the adventurer. That seems to fit me much more than the ESFP, which was the entertainer. And so that's just an example of this stuff shifting for me as well over time. And so again, maybe 5 years down the road after kids and a little bit more of life lived, maybe it changes again. I don't know, but I did think it was very interesting, and it's a really good point of, hey, you can do this, and you know, it changes over time, and you should reevaluate these things in general. So, all right. So enough about that. I'm going to jump in. I'm just going to read. I'm basically going to go back and forth between reading what the adventure Myers Briggs profile says, and then chiming in on how do I actually feel? Does that actually resonate with me? Does it not? What parts are feel more aligned or true versus don't for me? And again, the whole idea is just this is a way to start to better understand yourself so that you understand this is how I like to move in the world. Because my belief is the better you understand yourself and how you move in the world, your values, etc., the more easeful, if you will, navigating life is. And it's because you're very clear on what are your boundaries, what's true to you versus what are other people's influence or external influences that are shifting how you show up. So, all right, let's jump in to this part here. And maybe at some point, if I can, I'm new to the recording and podcasts and all of this stuff, but maybe I'll put like a side to side or a link in the show notes or whatever around where I'm looking at some of this stuff and where you can go to take the test and everything. But we'll see. So, okay. So, who is the adventurer personality type? Again, ISFP stands for introverted, observant, feeling, and prospecting traits, which are like the a part of the core of how you determine what someone's personality is. Like those and their equal opposites when combined together create the Myers-Briggs personality. What it says here is they tend to have open minds, approaching life, new experiences, and people with grounded warmth. Their ability to stay in the moment helps them uncover exciting potentials. And this is an interesting quote by Bob Dylan. I change during the course of a day. I wake and I'm one person, and when I go to sleep, I know for certain I'm somebody else. That's just interesting. I don't know that I would completely agree with that, but interesting take. Um, so let's keep going here. People with the ISFP personality type, adventurers, are true artists, although not necessarily in the conventional sense. For these types, life itself is a canvas for self expression. I definitely agree with that. I mean, that's why this podcast exists, is figuring out life. My whole thing here is that I've always pondered the question of like what is the point of this whole thing? What do I want out of life? Mostly because when I looked down the road at what I saw adulthood as a kid with my parents and other adults around me, and thought, what do I want to do when I grow up? It was never really clear to me. Like I saw, my dad is a firefighter, my mom was a realtor, my sister was a nurse, like all these things, and teachers and blah blah blah, and I just never resonated heavily with any of those things. They were cool in their own right, but I was never like, that's definitely what I want to do. And granted, that's just your career lens. Life is much more than that, but that's kind of the societally conditioned things that we look at. But I completely agree that life is about you figuring out what you want out of it, your definition of success, and then moving towards that over time and adjusting as your values, your boundaries, etc. change. So definitely agree with that. So let's continue with the summary here. From what they wear to how they spend their free time, though, they act in ways that vividly reflect who they are as unique individuals with their exploratory spirit and their ability to find joy in everyday life. ISFPs can be among the most interesting people you'll ever meet. I don't really have anything to say there. I think it still comes back to just we life as a canvas to express yourself. I very much agree with, and that's what that is. So, all right, next paragraph here. So, driven by their sense of fairness and their open mindedness, people with this personality type move through life with an infectiously encouraging attitude. They love motivating those close to them to follow their passions and usually follow their own interests with the same unhindered enthusiasm. So, yeah, on that right there, I definitely agree with that second part of it. They, love motivating people close to them to follow their own passions and usually following their own interests as well. I couldn't agree more. I have literally, since I was probably a teenager, always had this sense that I like to my natural like my default mode is to move against the grain. Like if I see the vast majority of people walking that way, I'm just naturally curious about well what's in the opposite direction. And I don't know, I have no idea why that's been the case, but I've always just wondered if everyone goes to church, why is everyone, going to church, and what do you do if you don't go to church? If everyone's playing this sport or obsessed with these things, why don't people look at this other stuff over there? Um, and that's just always it's just naturally how I've been built. It's still the way that I am today. Not saying that I don't still follow, societal norms here and there, but I've always just questioned and wanted to know is like, I get that everyone's doing this. So what's the opposite of that? And why are so few, or if anybody, why is no one doing this over here? And I've always encouraged people in that way as well to do that for themselves and follow it for themselves because, you know, again, it goes to me back to society, conditioning, familial, societal, whatever. I think a prime example is like the whole, go to college and become an engineer or a doctor or what's the third one? A lawyer, right? Like that kind of thing. It's like that's the way to be successful in life. And I know in a lot of cultures, those are the big things that you're supposed to do. And it's like if you don't follow that path, that trajectory, it's like you're shunned or frowned upon by your peers, your family, society. And I was always like, that's stupid. Like, not everyone wants to be a doctor. Like, I knew I was like, I don't care to be a doctor. Being a lawyer seems too complicated, too much like reading ridiculously worded things. Doctors have to learn a lot about the sciences that I personally just don't care that much about. And then with engineers, I didn't care enough about math to do engineering. So I was like, well, none of those clearly fit me. So what else is out there? As an example. But I've always been very big on figuring out, okay, what do I want to do? What's the stuff that makes me happy and that I'm curious about? Like human, like just literally like like evolutionary psychology, the human nature and how it works, shifts, it functions now in our modern society. That stuff fascinates me. So yeah, I completely agree with that general statement. The infectiously encouraging attitude. I can't really say one way or another. You tell me if my attitude is encouraging, infectiously encouraging. But yeah, okay. So continuing there, unassuming and humble ISFPs tend to see themselves as the irony. Unassuming and humble ISFPs tend to see themselves as just doing their own thing, so they may not even realize how remarkable they really are. Yeah, I agree. I don't think anything I'm doing is necessarily remarkable. I you tell me. basically. I do view it as I am just doing my own thing, just figuring out my way of navigating and being in the world, figuring out life. And that's what I'm doing. And I feel like for me, doing that gives other people permission to do it for themselves. And that's really kind of the goal, which is, again, your definition of success is yours and yours to define and only yours to define. And I believe that that's what I'm searching for and figuring out. And I encourage others to do the same thing. And it's if it doesn't look like what mine looks like, that's kind of the point. So, don't copy, copycat type of stuff. It's just like figure it out, ask the questions, try it out, keep moving. Okay. All right. Let's go to the next section here. The beauty of an open mind. So these individuals embrace a flexible, adaptable approach to life. Some personalities thrive on strict schedules and routines, but not ISFPs. They prefer to take each day as it comes, doing what feels right to them in the moment, and they make sure to leave plenty of room in their lives for the unexpected. Yeah, I completely agree with this. I have struggled with routines for a long, long time and sticking with routines. I'm not the type of person that's like 7 a.m. to 8:30. I'm going to be at the gym every single, day or Monday through Friday or whatever. And then I eat dinner around this time or lunch around this time or go to bed exactly at this time. I'm just not that type of person. And I totally on this particular note around the strict schedules and routines, this is one of those areas where, to me, this is a permission giving statement because for a long time, and honestly, even still now, sometimes to a degree, I feel like something's wrong with me. Like, uh, because I'm not as regimented about certain things that I don't want to be successful in life as bad as people who can be very regimented like that. Or like I'm not putting in enough work and not willing to sacrifice enough to get the success that I want. And I've always, in my head been like, well, it's the routine. And you think about like morning routines are such a big thing now. And um, all the stuff. And it's just like, okay, when you really break it down and think about it, there are people out there that are plenty successful that are not on any real strict routine like that. And maybe there's periods where they are, but it's not all of the time. And this to me was a statement in general that's like, okay, I don't have to be on a regimented routine or a schedule to move things forward. And over time I've really learned and I'm still learning. It's like for me it's more about there are certain things that I like to do in a day, right, or maybe in a week, but it doesn't have to be this very like boom 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 boom, it has to line up this way, because I can work out first thing in the morning if that's how I'm feeling, or I could go deep into doing some work that I really want to do and then work out in the afternoon and be fine. And that time in the afternoon it could be 12, it could be 2, it could be 4. And it just depends on what am I doing, what's taking up my time, my attention, when do I hit like a good transition point to be able to say, okay, now let's go get a workout in, for example. So yeah, again, this is a great example of like a permission giving type of realization or characteristic that if I had never taken this test and walked through this, I would have never realized, oh, this is a thing for adventurers. This isn't just me. There's not something wrong with me. I'm an adventurer, and this is just naturally how I navigate the world, operate, and what feels good and rhythmic aligned for me. So, all right, we're going to continue here. So this flexible mindset makes ISFP personalities remarkably tolerant and non-judgmental. They genuinely appreciate the diverse nature of the world, embracing people who may hold different opinions or practice unique lifestyles. It's no surprise then that they rarely try to convince people to change who they are or what they believe in. ISFPs want to live in a world where they and everyone else have the freedom to live as they see fit without judgment. Could not agree more. That is literally my whole thing is, we're all figuring out life. Our definition of success is unique to us because we see life quite literally through only one lens. We can't truly see life through other people's point of view. We can just interpret that through our own lens, but you always have to come back to what is it that you ultimately want out of this whole thing. And I literally tell people this. I love hearing about and being any small part of other people's adventures in life, in the journey called life, because I think it's fascinating what people are drawn to, how energetic and energized they can get on completely different topics, and it's just really fun and reassuring when you meet someone who went down whatever path they went down, especially for me when it's not traditional, because I feel like the vast majority of us are pushed down this kind of traditional lifestyle of go to school, get good grades, get a good job, blah blah blah. And I just love when I hear the opposite of that, or something that does not fall within that bubble, because it's just a reassurance of, hey, you don't have to do it that way to live the life that you actually want to live. So couldn't agree with that more. Um, let's say that said, their go with the flow mentality can have its downsides. People with this personality type may struggle to set long-term plans, let alone stick with them. Definitely agree there. As a result, ISFPs sometimes have a pretty cloudy view of their ability to achieve their goals, and they often worry about letting other people down. Wow. That is very, very true. Let's continue. They may find that adding a little structure to their lives goes a long way toward helping them feel more capable and organized without quashing their independent spirits. Okay, this is my first time like reading this. A few of the other ones I had read a little earlier, but this one actually, this is the first time I've read this in a while. And I agree. I definitely feel like I was just talking to one of my best friends yesterday, talking about kind of my long term vision and what I want to do, 5-10 years down the road. I'm like, I don't fully know what that really looks like. And it does feel like to me, my goals themselves don't feel as tangible, or if they feel tangible, it's like I make them, but they're not actually the goals that I want to have. They're the goals I feel like I should have. And then I worry about, once I commit to those things, there's a part of me that's like, well, you committed to this, you need to complete it and see it through. But then there's another part of me that's like, but I realize now that I've gone a little bit down the path, that's actually not, it's not resonating with me. It sounded good in the moment, and maybe it even felt good for a little while, but now it doesn't feel like it's really what I want. And so figuring out, okay, from there, what do I do, has always been a struggle for me. So I agree, and I definitely, worry about letting other people down. I'm a, recovering people pleaser, if you will. And that's very, very true. Sometimes I commit to things that I wish I hadn't, and then if I let someone down, it's either I let them down or I let myself down. And so it's a very, especially with my childhood, kind of growing up, golden child syndrome, I don't like to do that. It just doesn't feel great. So I totally agree there. And it's good for me to know, is like this whole idea of adding a little structure can go a long way towards helping me feel more capable and organized, without kind of quashing my independence there. That's an interesting takeaway that I hadn't really realized before. So yeah, that's interesting. All right, so we're going to keep moving on to a new section, living in harmony. All right, so in relationships, ISFPs are warm, friendly, and caring, taking wholehearted enjoyment in the company of their nearest and dearest. But make no mistake, they need dedicated alone time to recharge their energy after socializing with others. This alone time is what allows these personalities to reestablish a sense of their own identity, in other words, to reconnect with who they truly are. Yeah, so let's take that kind of sentence by sentence. First, enjoying just the company of the nearest and dearest to me. I agree. The way I look at it is, I I have a small number of close relationships, whether that's family, my wife, friends. I kind of keep a tight circle. I don't put myself out there. I used to, I was out socializing and doing all these things. Again, I used to masquerade as an entertainer, where the E and the I were flipped in my in my personality results there, but I've realized over time that's just not me. But I do enjoy the people that I do connect with. We connect deeply. And so the people that are in my life, while there are not a ton of them that I would say I have, the ones that I do have, those are deep connections that I really see. And I actually make very much a point, because a lot of my friends are, we live in a tech enabled world. A lot of my friends are across the country or even the world, and so I will make a point to catch up with them and just see where they're at in life and what's going on. And I'll put that in my calendar to make sure that I don't miss those things with the people that are nearest and dearest to me. But to the kind of the next sentence's points, I definitely need that alone time and the not socializing. It's like it's great to catch up. I can even walk away, especially with those close relationships. I can walk away energized from those conversations, and I still just need alone time to just process my own thoughts, figure out, my own things, and make sure that I'm not taking on what they're saying too closely or personally, and making it my own, and when I shouldn't. So definitely agree with that there. I'm gonna do a quick time check. Just want to be respectful. I don't want these episodes to be too crazy long here, because we're just getting started. Yeah, we're right about 30 minutes here. So let's see. Let's finish up this particular section, and then we'll go back, or we'll kind of finish things there and move on to kind of the uh, next section, if you will. Okay, so creative and free spirited people with this personality type march to the beat of their own drum. It would be easy to assume that they don't particularly worry about what others think of them, but oftentimes this isn't the case. ISFPs are thoughtful and perceptive, able to pick up on people's unspoken feelings and opinions, and it can upset them if they don't feel liked, approved of, or appreciated. Their emotional receptivity and genuinely their emotional receptivity and genuinely sensitive nature might be part of the reason why they tend to be so accepting and forgiving of others. If any personality type believes in giving something or someone a second chance, it's ISFPs. I definitely would say I march to the beat of my own drum, largely again, kind of naturally moving against the grain. And I definitely encourage others to do it as well. I know, my wife and I have had plenty of conversations, and my close friends around, they feel this way and they want to do things this way, but someone they care about feels a different way, or they're worried about X, Y, and Z. And I'm always the one to push and encourage them of like, who cares what they think or what they feel? Or, if you do care, that's okay. How do you still stand your own ground and be honest about where you're coming from, despite the fact that you're worried about, how someone's going to feel about that thing? I genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, I'm just like, if you're moving in a way that is anti you, so that you can not quote protect the relationship, or avoid a response you don't want to deal with, you are literally warping yourself, distorting yourself, to try and appease someone else at the expense of your own internal alignment, your own internal like self-love, all of those things. And I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm very much the type of person that's like, yo, you you've got to do what you want to do. And it doesn't mean, to kind of the rest of this thing's point, that I don't care about what other people think. There are certain people that I absolutely care about what they think, like my wife being the biggest one. I care about her opinion very much so. Doesn't mean I'm always going to move the way she wants to, or that we're always going to agree, but I definitely want to hear her take on what I'm dealing with, what I'm thinking, how I want to move, because I love and respect her, and she is, a part of the lifelong team partnership that we are in, as being, partners for each other, life partners for each other. Then I think about like my close friends, my family, less so, but still certainly care about what they think. But there are certain things where, for me, there's really kind of two things that I think about. One, you can hear someone's perspective and respect it, and still disagree with it or want to move differently. First off, there's nothing wrong with that, especially as long as you lay it out in a way that's like, hey, I appreciate and respect whatever it is you're talking about or what you're going through, and this is how I see it, that and how it's different or whatever. Um, and I think there's also an element of, hey, I see things over here, you see things over there. Let's talk about how we can ultimately understand each other and get kind of more overlapped in terms of where we're both coming from, right? Out of respect. So it's not that you don't care about people's, what they say, or you don't care if they don't like you or whatever. For me, it's more I'm very particular with whose opinions I really do care about. Mostly because if I cared about everyone's opinions, I'd never do anything for myself because everyone has different opinions. And two, it's like a question that I ask myself. Like I think of all the pop culture stuff that's out there, like so and so broke up with so and so, or is pregnant, or this happened, or whatever. And I'm like, okay, does this thing materially change my life in any way, shape, or form? If not, if whatever's going on with that person, whoever that is, doesn't materially change my life, why do I care? Why am I going to spend extra, energy there? But if it does materially change my life, okay, that's someone who I want to spend more time making sure that maybe I don't upset them, or making sure that we both feel heard in whatever the circumstance is, and kind of moving from there. So definitely believe that. All right, last kind of bit here, and then we'll wrap it up. Despite the challenges that they may face due to their sensitivity, ISFPs live in the present and they know that they don't need to dwell on past hurts or frustrations rather than focusing on how things could be different. People with this personality type have an incredible capacity for appreciating what's right about life just as it is. Everywhere they look, they can find sources of beauty and enjoyment that others might miss, and this perspective is just one of the many gifts that they share with the world. Oh, thanks. Um, yeah, I would say that's like the two sides of the same coin. Like in the best of times or in the best of moments, that is true, and it doesn't mean I don't ruminate on the past or where the future is going to take us, or all of those things. Definitely still get caught up in that stuff as well. But I know for me, I do actively try to, or I do actively pull myself into the present and say, hey, we're in a great place, or this is actually really awesome. Or, I think I often say, like, if this could be worse, right? And it could be better. But I remind myself of, hey, all things considered, this could be really great. Like, for example, um, where I live right now, our we don't our AC is broken at the moment. We're working on getting it fixed, but like our radiators are still on until I think June 1st. So we've got like another week until this stuff turns off and it just gets a lot cooler. But the issue is that because they're on, our AC is not working and everything. It's like it can get pretty hot in here on days where the temperature's higher. We're moving from spring into summertime, all that stuff. So while they're still on, it can get pretty hot. But I think about the fact that we have a roof over our heads, we have food, that we can put on the table, all these things, and it's like it could be a lot worse than this. Like I could have nowhere to live, right? I could be dealing with a lot of other things. Like if one of the worst things that I deal with on a daily basis is the radiator's on while it's a little hot. Okay, I can get over that, for example. So that's just a kind of relation there. So all right, we're gonna wrap this one up here. But thanks for joining this episode. Hopefully, I know this is really honestly more for me just to kind of go through this and talk more about these things. But hopefully, you guys were able to get some nuggets out of this of just how doing things like personality tests, and we'll probably get into astrology and other stuff down the road at some point, but doing these types of things can really help with you just saying, oh, okay, that is me, that does resonate. And even parts of it, it's like, oh, maybe that doesn't resonate, or it does sometimes, it doesn't other times, but you can really see how that all fits together there. So yeah, I'm a big advocate and proponent of these types of things, self-awareness, the pseudosciences, to really just help you learn more about yourself, and learn more about what's your true self versus your not self, and all that type of stuff. So hopefully this was helpful. If not, then it's just a ramble, and that's okay because we're figuring out life. So all right, till next time. Bye.